Today, Formula One only visits state-of-the-art facilities. Well, at least on paper it does. And the reason I say that is because they seem to be going to more and more street tracks in the recent years. But at least when they go to proper tracks, if you want to call them that, they're all pretty high up on the they've got everything they need list. The paddocks are spacious and can hold all of the team's hospitality suites. Gone are the days of a motorhome, as all the sponsors and guests need to be wined and dined as they take in the VIP experience of a Grand Prix. Medical facilities that are probably on par with an actual hospital, and everything is modern and clean, to the point where you could probably do brain surgery in the garages. But these tracks have come under criticism in recent years. They're too clean. They lack a certain charm. Only the tracks that have been around forever still have a certain something. Maybe it's the ghosts of the past hanging around. And with these newer purpose-built tracks like Kota, Korea, India and so on, they all get accused of being like car parks because of all that tarmac runoff. But what if I was to tell you that for a couple of years in the 1980s, Formula One raced in an actual car park, like 17-year-olds in jumped-up Citroen Saxos at the local Halfords? Las Vegas, the City of Sin, they call it. Nestled in the Mojave Desert close to the shores of Lake Mead, you might be familiar with a scaled-down and fictionalized version of the area if you've played Fallout New Vegas, one of my favourite video games of all time. The best place in America to lose all your money, but at the same time you can take advantage of the city's nickname. Gambling is the main industry, and nearby Boulder City is one of two places in Nevada where gambling is illegal, because that was a town established to house the workers that built the Hoover Dam, and the rules basically were, no gambling because you're working. You want to gamble? You go to Vegas on your own time. Some of you might be thinking about the women for hire industry that Nevada is also famous for, but in Clark County where Vegas is, it's illegal. It's also illegal in Reno. Vegas is also the place most associated with acts like Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin and the rest of the Rat Pack. The old crooners from the pre-war and immediate post-war era found a new home in the city and established the city as a playground for adults. Draw of Elvis and the swing singers helped turn Vegas from a dusty town from the Old West into the neon paradise with the seedy underside that it is today. Now Sinatra is also one of my all-time favourites. Might need to break out the swing music for this video instead of the jazz. Sinatra, Martin, Sammy Davis Jr. and those guys helped fill the casinos and the hotels, and swing kind of became the de facto music for the Las Vegas Strip, similar to how jazz came to be in New Orleans or country music in Nashville. But in 1980, around the time that Sinatra released New York, New York, something else was coming into Vegas to try and take advantage of the bottomless pit of money that's there. Formula One already had a foothold in the United States by 1979. There were two Grand Prix in the US on the calendar, that being the US Grand Prix at Watkins Glen and the US GP West at Long Beach in California. But while Watkins Glen had often been the end-of-season party for the drivers, because the location was scenic, the autumn weather putting everybody in a good mood, and championships often being decided by the time they got there, they could party a little bit more. But by 1978 or so, the drivers were starting to become irritated by the place. The circuit had barely changed since the 1960s. In the 1970s, fans had started to get a bit rowdy and would often go to a place called The Bog, located in the boot section, to set fire to stuff, including, according to reports, a Greyhound bus. This was paved over and turned into a car park in 1975, but the security was pants, the track was bumpy, and it wasn't keeping up with how F1 cars were evolving. So in 1978, the FIA said to the circuit, improve or lose the race, and the circuit did make the improvements. But it cost them so much to do so, they had to take out a loan from the Formula One Constructors Association, or FOCA, to pay the prize money for the 1980 race. Alan Jones won that final race at the Glen. It was supposed to be on the calendar for 1981, but it was cancelled because Watkins Glen couldn't pay the debt owed to FOCA and the New York state government was refusing to help them. In Nevada, racing had been happening in the 1960s at a place called Stardust Raceway, located in Spring Valley on the western side of the city. This track hosted sports car racing in Can-Am and USAC and also NHRA drag racing, and the circuit had been developed by the Stardust Racing Association, a collaboration between the owners of the Desert Inn and the Stardust casinos, as well as, allegedly, the local mob bosses. The casinos acted as the promoters, and the idea was simple: attract the high rollers to Las Vegas. This track hosted races between 1965 and 1968, before the association was dissolved on the 1st of April, the day after the final race. In 1969, the track was sold and continued to host NHRA drag racing until 1971, when property developers started building Spring Valley around the drag strip and then on the drag strip. In 1972, the Las Vegas Speedrome opened in the northeast of the city close to Nellis Air Force Base. It's now called the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. By the time the 1980s rolled around, Formula One was on the up and was visiting tracks in Africa, the Americas and Europe, as well as having visited Japan before, with Australia to come later. Bernie Ecclestone's vision for Formula One as a global sport was now starting to come to fruition. Formula One was now on television, and sponsorships were allowing drivers and teams to have more money than they'd ever had before, and budgets were increasing year on year. The casinos saw the appeal of Formula One. It attracted people with money, and it attracted the rich, the famous, and the beautiful. Long story short, they saw an opportunity to make a lot of money, so they reached out to Bernie. The race should have been on the calendar in 1980, a few weeks after the race at Watkins Glen, but it was cancelled for reasons unknown. But when the Glen started to fall into financial trouble, the venue in Vegas looked even more promising. Now, what's funny about the 1981 season is that the calendar was sandwiched in between two races in the United States. The race in Vegas was going to end the season, while the Grand Prix in Long Beach would start the season. That's not even the best bit, because the two circuits were only about 300 miles away from each other. The race was in the car park of the Caesars Palace Hotel and Casino. Literally. Now, don't be fooled by the Google satellite picture here, because since the race the casino has expanded, but back in 1981 there was a huge car park that Formula One turned into a racetrack. It was 2.2 miles or 3.6 kilometers long, so only a smidge longer than Monaco, and ran anti-clockwise in the desert heat, something that F1 drivers at the time were not built for. And the cars were ground effect at this point too, with grip almost at its peak. The following year, Nelson Piquet would pass out on the podium at the Brazilian Grand Prix. Mansell would collapse trying to push his Lotus over the line at Dallas, I think it was. There's probably another couple of instances from that time as well. Ground effect was probably going to work the best it had ever had, because the track was so flat and so smooth, the whole sucking the car to the ground thing would have just been perfect, really. The track for the drivers wasn't exactly interesting. John Watson struggled to find reference points for braking thanks to the 3-foot high concrete walls and found it hard to get a rhythm going, while others criticised how flat and repetitive it was, especially turns 1 through to 10, which were, well, effectively copy and pasted. For the first round in 1981, it would be a championship decider. Carlos Reutemann, Nelson Piquet and Jacques Lafitte had an opportunity to take the title, although Lafitte's chances were a bit slimmer. He had to win the race with Reutemann no higher than 4th and Piquet no higher than 3rd, or to be 2nd with the other two non-scoring. If Lafitte won with Piquet 3rd and Reutemann 4th, then Lafitte would take the title, despite all three drivers being on equal points. He'd have had the same amount of wins as Piquet, but more second places. Reutemann would get pole ahead of Jones and Villeneuve with Piquet in 4th. Down at the other end of the grid was Gilles' brother Jacques, after whom the 1997 champion was named, and also a bloke called Slim Borgard, who was usually found playing drums for Swedish pop royalty ABBA. Jones went off into the lead off the line, but Reutemann would drop down to 5th. Mansell would climb up the positions, but the championship looked to be going the way of Piquet, who, by the latter stages of the race, looked to be on the edge of exhaustion, as his head could be seen rolling around in the cockpit. His 5th place was enough, he just had to hang on, while Reutemann was dropping out of the points because he'd lost 4th gear. If Piquet had to drop out through exhaustion, Reutemann was champion, and he had entered the race top of the standings. Piquet held on to finish 5th and took the title by a single point, the top 10 being Jones, Prost, Giacomelli, Mansell, Piquet and Lafitte, who scored the points, and then Watson, Reutemann, Pironi and Rosberg. Villeneuve was disqualified for not lining up on the grid properly, while Mario Andretti dropped out with suspension problems. After the race, it took Piquet around 15 minutes to recover as he was physically sick, and he had to visit Sugar Ray Leonard's physio afterwards to help his neck recover. For 1982, there were plans to have kart and Formula One on the same weekend. The plan was to have Can-Am on Friday, Formula One on Saturday, kart on Sunday. And when kart announced the dates for the Las Vegas race, Formula One immediately changed its plans. They moved the race to September instead. The reason being was they wanted to shorten the gap between the Italian Grand Prix and the Las Vegas Grand Prix, and also to avoid a bit of a scheduling conflict with NBC. The World Series was on at the same time, so taking Formula One away from that Saturday would allow the baseball to be on the Saturday, and then the kart race on the Sunday, and both be on TV. At least that was the official explanation anyway. And just like the year before, it was a championship decider. Rosberg, who was leading the standings in a season tarnished with death and injury, had to finish 6th with Watson 2nd or lower. Watson needed to win the race with Rosberg 7th or lower. Watson and Rosberg would have had equal points, but Watson would win, having won more races. The race would be won by Michele Alboreto, taking his first win and Tyrrell's first for 4 years. Watson was 2nd, but Rosberg had managed to get up to 5th, and as such, took the world title. Alboreto would also be the 11th different winner of that season, the last for the first ground effect era. On the constructors front, despite losing Villeneuve in a fatal accident at Zolder and then losing Pironi to career-ending injuries sustained at Hockenheim, Ferrari was still able to win the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari didn't start the Belgian Grand Prix withdrawing after Villeneuve's accident and then only had one driver at Monaco, Detroit and Canada, as well as missing the Swiss Grand Prix at Dijon later in the season. Part of this is due to a lot of teams and drivers missing the 1982 San Marino Grand Prix as the final battle of the FISA-FOCA war was waged, as well as the likes of Renault and McLaren unable to make the gains required with Ferrari not present. Ferrari would win with 74 points, and it would also be the final season for Lotus founder Colin Chapman, who died of a heart attack in the December of 1982. The race was binned off by Formula 1 for 1983. Instead, the kart series would visit the circuit in 83 and 84 on a mile-long oval version of the circuit. Danny Sullivan would be the final pole sitter with a 33-second lap, with Tom Snever winning the final race. Modifications were made to the track to make it slightly safer, such as moving the concrete walls 5 feet further back on the final corner. But it wasn't really an oval. It was shit. The high rollers never really came. The crowds were poor. The casinos lost money. But it's not like F1 went on to better things because Dallas, Detroit and Phoenix happened before a deal was struck with Tony George in the late 1990s, at the height of the American open-wheel Civil War, for Formula 1 to use a road course at Indianapolis. The site was transformed after 1984, with a massive shopping centre built on one part of the circuit and the Mirage Casino built on the other. You wouldn't even know there'd been a racetrack there. This weekend, Formula 1 will return to Las Vegas on a Moomin-shaped course that incorporates the Las Vegas Strip. The whole thing is basically a showpiece and nothing else. And with ticket prices being what they are, it's going to be amazing that anybody will turn up at all, really. With organisers also putting vinyl on the glass of bridges over the strip to stop people watching for free. And many in the city are expressing the dislike of the race, effectively shutting out the normal person, as well as causing carnage for business owners. Another race to attract the high rollers. Last time it was on a track that nobody liked, this time it's on a track that nobody wants. And if it ends up being a total flop and doesn't end up lasting the 10 years that Formula 1 wants from it, well, won't that be a kick in the head? So then, a look at the last time Formula 1 went to Las Vegas. If this has taught you something new about a race long lost to history, then like the video so I know a good job was done. And for more stuff like this, subscribe and ring-a-ding that bell so you never miss out on any future content. Massive thanks to the patrons of Patreon and the channel members, and if you want to contribute to the picture purchasing fund, then a link to Patreon is in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, and my affiliate links. The join button for members is underneath the video, along with super thanks if you want to do a one and done donation. So until next time, I've been Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.